to your Daily 5 for Monday, November 27th, 2023. After having a wonderful Thanksgiving here in the United States, or I don't know if anybody else celebrates it. I think I've said this before. I'm not really sure. I know Canada does some version of it. But anyway, I decided I wanted to watch a movie right on the borderline of the 80s and the 90s, which is a really interesting period when you see where the 80s horror movies transitioned into 90s horror movies. So I picked one from 1990 that I had read some really polarized reviews of, and that's normally a good sign for me, and it was in this case. But it's a movie from 1990 called Mirror Mirror. Now, if you're going to search for this, make sure you put the year in, because there's a Mirror Mirror from 2016 or something like that. I want to say that one, I guess, was very popular, and so that's all you're going to get if you just look up Mirror Mirror. You have to put 1990, then you'll get the correct one. And the simple explanation of what the film is, and what most of the things you will read explain it as, is a horror movie about being a weird person in high school. And that is absolutely true. That is a very correct description of what this is. This is a horror movie about a kid who does not fit in the high school that she's going to. But what's more interesting to me as a way of explaining it, and this is the explanation I'll use when I talk about it on Friday, is this movie feels like something that somebody watched the Tim Burton film Beetlejuice and thought, what if I were to do that as a straightforward horror film focusing on Lydia when she goes to high school and what would happen to her there? That's what this feels like. And don't get me wrong, I love Beetlejuice, but this is an interesting, almost parallel universe version of what Beetlejuice would look like in a lot of ways, because the character looks like, at times she looks a lot like Winona Ryder, the actual actress, whose name is Rainbow Harvest, I believe. She didn't act for very long. She did some acting jobs, then she did stuff that was behind the camera, and then she left the industry entirely at some point. But there's times where if you watch this movie, you will see her, and you could easily think this was Winona Ryder doing a Lydia character in another film. It's not. I mean, then you see her in another light, and she looks very different. But the essential plot is she and her mother is having some mental health issues because her father died, and they move to a new town, and that new town is basically Valley Girl, California, where everybody looks like exactly what you would expect somebody in the late 80s, early 90s to look like in southern LA. And the character of Megan, who's essentially the Lydia stand-in here, looks like Lydia. And so she is immediately set upon by all the mean girl alpha types. And she just so happens to have a mirror in her house that contains a demon. And that demon starts to, at first, help her with some of her problems. And, I mean, there's not really much of a surprise to the way this movie unfolds. But eventually it becomes clear that the demon is not necessarily so interested in Megan's best interest. What a surprise. It's a demon. But like I said, the movie is fine. I would actually say it's a pretty successful movie. And it spawned 3 sequels. So obviously it did well enough that they made 3 sequels to this thing, none of which I'm planning to watch. I kind of like this movie as a one and done. So I really don't, unless I read something really interesting about the sequels going completely off the rails or being better in some way, I don't really plan to visit the sequels at this point. Maybe that will change again as I read about them. But as a single movie, I think it works very well. It feels like, I mean, there's elements of it that definitely show its time and its budget, but there's other parts of it that I think are actually better than you would expect. I'd never heard of this movie. I think I may have seen the artwork for the poster here or there, but it never really grabbed me as artwork. It's pretty simple as far as what the actual what VHS box art or what now the movie or the DVD cover would be. It's not really all that attention grabbing. But I saw a synopsis that said something about, imagine if Lydia went to a high school and was tortured from Beetlejuice. And I went, that's interesting. And then when I looked at the reviews, they were so up and down. I thought, okay, this is normally a movie that at least is worth talking about. And it turns out it is. So I really enjoyed it. Now, I don't know. I'm not going to necessarily say it's an unknown kind of, that it should be more well known. It is very formulaic in a lot of ways. And the music is okay. I thought it was a Full Moon production from the music, so that should give you an indication if you know what Full Moon music usually sounds like. So it's definitely not something that you're not going to recognize as a B movie or a kind of a lower budget horror film. But I think it's a better example of something like this. So again, I would recommend it to most people who watch movies like this, that like 80s, 90s horror. Again, it's Mirror Mirror from 1990, a better movie than you might expect. Later.